Hello everyone, I'm Tengjia. I'm very glad to introduce you our design research project, investigating the motivational effect of fantasy and similarity through avatar identification in AR game-based learning. I'm doing this presentation on behalf of my colleagues, Erik, Spek, Jing Hu, and Max Birk. We are from Industrial Design, Eindhoven University of Technology. When children engage in virtual learning, they frequently experience a lack of motivation and concentration. Augmented reality game-based learning is a promising option for increasing learning motivation and can provide a more immersive context. But game-based learning does not always enhance motivation to study. Thus, in-depth empirical understanding on how to develop more inspiring game-based learning might assist game designers. While AR fantasy makes learning more engaging, avatar self-similarity provides players with approachable and straightforward circumstances to begin. However, it is still unknown which sorts of contexts might interest players in game-based learning, and how to combine learning with captivating fantasy and engaging self-similarity. Therefore, we design our game Mesos AR with 4 types of avatars: similar fantasy, the magician Ruby; dissimilar fantasy, the dragon Body; dissimilar real life, the cow Vicky; and dissimilar real life, the student Luca. In the fantasy scenarios, users play Rubin's rule, a similar human character. Rubin needs to calculate the total power of 2 magic gems that enable the magic spell to free the friend. We try to neutralize the gender of the role to weaken a possible gender effect in the actual test. Playing as Body, the dragon, a fantasy character that relatively dissimilar to players. Players need to hatch a dragon egg with an adequate firepower amount. The interaction steps are the same in all 4 versions of the game. They need to hold the virtual button until the right number pops up. When players complete the task, the baby dragon is born. In real-life settings, Luca, the normal student, who is a human avatar similar to players, needs to add up the food's total price onto cards to complete the order. After that, Luca can deliver the food to the brother. When playing Vicky's role, a real-life animal that is dissimilar to players, players' task is about computing the delivery's total weight and sending them to the local farm's customer, the horse. A total of 34 primary school students aged 9 to 10 years old were invited to this research. These students are from the same class, 19 of them self-identified as boys, and 15 of them self-identified as girls. Everyone played 4 versions in random sequence. After the gameplay, they were asked to fill in a 5-point Likert scale questionnaire. The questionnaire contains questions from avatar identification of player identification questionnaire, and the enjoyment part from the intrinsic motivation inventory. In player identification questionnaire, we select 2 subdivisions, similarity and wishful identification. Similarity identification describes when players find themselves resembling a character. Wishful identification describes players' desire to be like a character. In the enjoyment part of intrinsic motivation inventory, players are asked to rate how much they enjoy playing in this game. Through this research setting, we would like to answer two research questions. Question 1. Do players have distinct avatar identifications for different settings? Question 2. How do fantasy and similarity settings affect motivation in game-based learning through player identification? Two-way repeated measure ANOVA is conducted, setting fantasy real life, humanoid, animaloid, i.e. the similar and dissimilar, as two within factors. Similarity identification and wishful identification as dependent variable, respectively. A significant difference in users' wishful identification to fantasy and real-life avatars is found. F equals to 7.02, P equals to 0.01. We can tell that players wish to be more like a fantasy character than a real-life one. There is also a statistically significant effect of similarity in players' wishful identification. F equals to 21.31, P almost equals to 0. In line with our estimation, players find themselves more alike humans than animals. Although it is kind of obvious, but children's thoughts sometimes are unpredictable, so it is always good to have a solid answer from them. We can also tell from the result that there is no significant effect of fantasy or real-life avatars on players' similarity identification. No interaction effect of similarity and fantasy is found. The ANOVA results show that children have the strongest desire to set fantasy-similar avatar grouping as their wishful identity. Humanoid characters are regarded as more similar to them, no matter it is with fantasy setting or not. We conduct two sets of partial correlation to answer our research question 2. How do fantasy and similarity settings affect motivation in game-based learning through player identification? To see the effect of fantasy and real-life avatars, the effect of similar and dissimilar settings is controlled. Looking from aspects of similar and dissimilar, we control the effect of fantasy or real-life settings. With fantasy avatars, there is a significant correlation between wishful identification and enjoyment. R equals 2.26, P equals 2.03. Similarity identification and enjoyment. R equals 2.25, P equals 2.05. No significant correlation between enjoyment and identification was found in the gameplay with real-life avatars. A significant correlation between similarity identification and enjoyment, I equals 2.24, P equals 2.05, is shown with humanoid similar avatars. No significant association is spotted in animaloid, i.e. dissimilar avatars. The descriptive data in general shows children participants enjoy playing all 4 conditions of our game. This phenomenon can be viewed as a success of AR game-based learning. It can also be because children are too kind to give any hard time to the game designer. We would like to further discuss about our research question 1. Do players have distinct avatar identifications for different settings? The answer is yes. According to our findings, similarity is the only key to similar identification, and the players have a greater wishful identification to avatars with high self-similarity and fantasy. These findings could be because fantasy settings allow participants to admire supernatural abilities and imaginatively meet their emotional demands. A more similar humanoid avatar would have less self-discrepancy between players and avatars, increasing players' chance of identifying with the avatars. We also would like to further discuss about QR2, how do fantasy and similarity settings affect motivation in game-based learning through player identification. We find that players perceive more enjoyment through visual identification and similarity identification when playing with fantasy avatars. This could be because visual identification enables players to alter their self-perception and feel better about themselves through identification with fantasy avatars. The phenomenon that they perceive also happiness through similar identification with fantasy characters can be related to fantasy play, the act of playing among children with themes and roles that require imagination and make-believe. Just as parts of them do believe they are a super-powered hero. In contrast, many of today's educational materials are using real-life situations as examples, which aid in application, but do not captivate children from the beginning. A lot of game-based learning tools also choose daily animals like squirrels, rabbits, bears as the main characters, which might miss the opportunity of motivating children through avatar identification. With the advantage of enabling avatar identification, fantasy settings in game-based learning can lead to a motivational play without consciously thinking about the learning challenge. And the similarity allows players to reflect and relate to themselves, which can be appropriate in situations when players reflect on what they've learned. A prior study also has discovered that similarity identification promotes intuitive control, suggesting similar avatar is suitable for beginners, people with less gaming experience. We also suggest designers to design their game-based learning avatars flexibly. This research doesn't aim to limit avatars design in game-based learning within the type we found attractive to children. We encourage designers to provide various perspectives, including avatars in different fantasy elements and resembling players in different ways. It is our research limitation that we only provide 4 avatars in this research. There are more to be explored. Also, the questionnaire we use doesn't specifically target children. Further research can be extended beyond 4 types of avatar in our research. In our future work, we are exploring fantasy narrative and its effect on player experience, like autonomy and presence. We designed motivational AR2 as an extension of this research. Using motivational AR2, we will reveal more about fantasy game elements, fantasy state, and player experience. We are also interested in AR fantasy's effect on learning efficiency. Therefore, we designed another AR game for learning chemistry, named Chemikami AR. We are interested in exploring how fantasy influences players' working memory, i.e., the short-term memory. We will continuously work on areas of AR fantasy in game-based learning. Making playing meaningful and learning fun. We hope this research can inspire more researchers to explore more aspects of AR game-based learning, including but not limited to storytelling, visual effects, immersive technology, and more. Thank you for your attention.